If we had any idea where our products came from, we probably wouldn't want to buy them anymore, said a very clever friend of mine. Hey everybody, it's Chloe from Spangly Jewelry for the second episode of Chloe's Signs and Wonders. I want to talk today about Venus and her expressive rulership of Libra and how that has inspired me to talk about a topic that I think is fairly important for the spiritual community right now. In Taurus, where she's in her receptive rulership, it's a far more pretty, pleasurable, delightful, earthy body, sensual sign, whereas her aspect in Libra, which is an air sign, takes on a more cerebral, intellectual approach to harmony and relationships, harmony with the environment, and it can also take on a sense of justice. With the scale in each hand, Venus can look at the issues of both shadow and light and not judge them, because there are a lot of us who are going to practice something that has negative issues attached to it, and rather than turning away from these issues, I think it is far better as a community, a spiritual community, to look at the issues without judgment and to creatively come up with ways that we can create a more harmonious social and environmental landscape. So let's talk about gemstones. 10 years ago, I ran across an article that talked about the conditions of a guy who mined jade in China, and he had, of course, his family and his extended family to care for. The safety regulations in the mine that he worked in were non-existent. He was the guy who used the chainsaw to cut the boulders down into smaller pieces, so he dealt with a lot of dust daily. He ended up getting something called dust lung. And he was about my age with a family dependent on him, and he was going to die from this awful disease. I felt this enormous sadness and a connection to him, just because our ages were similar and because we were both on one end and on the other of the spectrum involved in the gemstone trade, because I used jade in my jewelry, making jewelry. And I had to decide at that point. I knew I couldn't continue to exclusively use gemstones. So I had to take rather a creative approach to how I made jewelry, and I decided on polymer clay. It has also afforded me, it being such a versatile medium, it has afforded me a lot of opportunities to be incredibly experimental with my creativity. One of the most delicious synchronicities that came out of deciding not to use or to limit my use of gemstones, because I still use them, but to limit my use of gemstones in my work, was when I was approached by Lorianne Lothian of Lunatic Astrology to do some collaborative work on jewelry line, which became Lunartistic, the Lunartistic collection. Incredibly, there is one crystal. I happen to know where the mine is. I've been mining selenite from this vein since I was a kid. Her lunatic astrology, of course, is an exaltation of the moon, and bringing the feminine back into the forefront where it belongs. Selenite has an association with the Greek goddess of the moon, Selene. So it was just this really incredible, when she approached me, it was just this really incredible affirmation of my decision to not use gemstones anymore, but to pursue the more creative aspects of manipulating clay, and also to specialize in one particular gemstone that I personally went out and harvested and paid myself fair wages for. I got a little bit of a sunburn. That was about the worst of it. So that was a really nice affirmation of having the ability to change my values after understanding the harms that what I was doing, the harms I supported. So that is the gemstone trade for jewelry. And there's been a new spike in gemstone uses, and that is with healing crystals, which has boomed substantially in the last 5 years. And it's no surprise that these same kind of exploitive practices that were happening with the gemstone trade for jewelry are also happening with the gemstone trade in healing crystals. There's an article that I'm going to put in the links below by Tess McClure from The Guardian. She called it Dark Crystals, and I'm like, don't co-opt my childhood. I love that show. I don't want dark crystals associated with the evils of the exploitation of the gemstone trade. That's my only. But otherwise, she talks about the brutal reality behind the booming wellness craze. And if you read that article, she specifically talks about what's happening with the mining practices in Madagascar and how that's affecting the local communities there. So all of this brings us to the question that is pounding on our front door these days, in terms of climate change, in terms of capitalism, in terms of poverty, in terms of everything I can think of to think about. The fuck are we gonna do? I mean, and I think that the impulse is just to do something big and sexy and save the world. And that impulse, it's not really a workable solution to save the whole damn world as an individual. But what we can do is we can stay informed, and we can think creatively about the ways in which we can shift our habits and shift our values. If you start making fundamental changes in your values, you're gonna create a shockwave that moves the air and earth around you. I was a smoker. Smoking filters, cigarette butts, are like 210% of the garbage in this world, and I contributed to that. You know, I quit smoking and I started vaping. I didn't do it because I felt bad about cigarette butts, but I did it for my health. But one of the benefits of that is there's far less litter associated with it. And of course, as soon as I read that article about that guy who was my age 10 years ago in China, who was going to die and his entire family wasn't going to have somebody supporting them anymore because I fucking wanted jade to go on my bracelets, I found a workaround. I found something that was far more in alignment.